excited because we've got a very, very special guest joining us today. First of all, my name is Mick.
Paul Keeley.
Very exciting. We are joined by Emerson Blackman, who is self-described as the most passionate passive house owner who happens to be a mortgage broker. Emerson, take it away.
Good morning, guys. Thank you for having me here. I'm excited to share my love of the passive house world and make sure people understand what they are and also understand the financing so you can actually get in it.
Right on. Can you tell us a bit about yourself? How did you become a mortgage broker and how did you learn about passive house?
Oh, great. My wife and I had been looking at coming to Muskoka for several years. So we started investigating the different types of properties. We looked at straw bale. We looked at a lot of things. We wanted to do something that was environmentally friendly, kind of tie into what our beliefs were. So we ended up finding a beautiful piece of land here in Muskoka. And then my wife, actually, I take no credit. My wife was the brains behind it. And she did her research over several years and it came upon the passive house and net zero idea. And then we just kind of developed from there.
How did you become a mortgage broker? Because you told me in a little preliminary phone call yesterday this incredible story. And I thought our viewers would love to hear that.
Yeah, not a problem. I came from the banking and the investment side. I got my broker's license initially in the late 80s on the investment side as an investment broker. After we purchased our property up here, we discovered that even though we'd been with TD Bank for many years, they weren't able to do what we needed. They didn't understand the concept of buying raw land, and they certainly didn't understand the concept of a prefab home or anything other than a traditional build. So the bank wasn't able to service us. We went back and forth through several banks to no avail. And eventually a colleague of mine referred me to a mortgage broker. The mortgage broker came out, we met. She liked the idea, I liked the idea, and then the rest is history. She wanted me to work for her. And at the time, I wasn't too interested. I wanted to stay being lazy, but she persisted. And then another colleague suggested the same thing. And then I met a third person who wanted me to do mortgages. So I figured if three people saw something that I didn't see, they saw something right. I wrote my licensing exam, got on board, and the rest is history. Also, for me, I was not happy with the way things went initially. So I wanted to make sure that I could provide the service that's needed. My wife and I, we ended up losing a lot of money by making mistakes. So when I'm running my practice, I can take the mistakes that I made and make sure that my clients understand how to avoid those pitfalls.
What was that deciding factor? And I guess proceeding with passive house over these other homes?
I think the main part was just the homework that my wife did. She investigated for years, so it wasn't a spur of the moment thing. We looked at the pros and cons to all of the different designs. We found a lot of information out of Germany, of all places, and the more we researched in it, the more it made sense. It just made sense. A friend of ours here in Muskoka, he is an engineer and he specializes in doing the HVAC systems. So we were talking about how the importance of a property being airtight and how efficient it becomes, and more importantly, how comfortable it becomes. So his input kind of finalized our decision making into going with a passive house. And then from a business standpoint, it's very difficult to go to any lender and discuss a straw bale. I don't know of any lenders in Ontario or in Canada that are going to do a mortgage on a straw baled house. It can't be done properly yet.
And your project is a little bit more unique in the sense that you are off grid, correct?
We are completely off grid.
That's amazing. And so what is your heating system? How do you heat and cool the space again? What are the systems that you guys use primarily?
We installed, when the build was being done, our friend of ours who designed the solar system said that, first of all, your electricity is free, so don't worry about the cost there. So he said it made sense having an air conditioner simply because it allows it's an easy way to take out humidity if the windows are open during the summertime or we're going back and forth. Outside of that, the house stays cool. So when I explained to my friends, basically I say my house is a thermos. I live in a really cool looking thermos. So if it's hot, it stays hot. If it's cold, it stays cold. The cold stays out there, the heat stays in, or vice versa. In terms of heat in our house, we went slightly off the traditional passive rule because my wife, we had a fireplace in the city. My wife loved the fireplace, so we opted for a really efficient wood stove. So in order to maintain our envelope, it has a direct air intake from outside, so that the house is still airtight to the point where it's sometimes too airtight.
How much wood would you say you guys burn on average over the course of a winter?
It's freakish. Not much at all. Like when our first winter, I was scared because we came from the city. We're two city folks who moved to Muskoka. We know the horror stories about, oh, it can get to 40 below, but we use a fraction. We're using about 2 cords at most in the winter because the house doesn't really get cold.
And the cost of 2 face cords of wood, we're talking less than a couple $100 a year for heating, similar to heating with an air source heat pump. So major benefit in building any passive home in any situation is the energy conservation ability. But you mentioned air conditioning there, so you do have a heat pump that you use for air conditioning as well. Is that part of the system?
So it's connected with, there's an ERV system.
Mm-hmm.
So we can either draw air directly from outside, or we can recirculate air throughout the house, internally. And we only use the air conditioner in the summertime if it's high humidity. Outside of that, it's not necessary. We've just learned the fine art of when to open the windows and when not to. Cool. So normally we open the windows after dinner, and windows stay open all night, and then we close them in the morning. If it's gonna be 30 something Celsius, we simply close the windows in the morning, and the house stays cool.
That's very cool. So ultimately, just during heat wave conditions. I forget if we were talking about this the other day, Emerson, but did you, before you decided to build passive, did you step inside to a passive home before you decided to build yours, and just felt the comfort, and was that part of your decision making process moving forward?
It was a major part of it was the research. We didn't know anybody who owned a passive house. We've been in a few houses that were like an ICF type home, but we've never been inside a passive house. But we did the homework, we checked, and then when we looked at some of the parts that were going into it, the doors and the windows and the way the walls were designed, we realized it was going to be totally incomparable to the house that we had back in the city. So our house in the city was a nice house, but there is no comparison. The wintertime, the cold air, you'd feel the cold air coming through vents. You'd feel it coming through the outside wall sockets. In the summertime, the air conditioner was running 24/7. In wintertime, the furnace is running 24/7.
Moving into that home for the first time where you slept in your brand new passive home, that first night, can you remember that first day, week being in the home? What was different? What felt different?
It was a strange feeling. Like we've never lived in something that airtight. When you close the door, it's almost like a vacuum in your ear. Like we had our doors were massive, the windows were really solid, so when everything was bolted down and closed, it felt strangely secure. I've never lived in a place that was soundproof like that. And it's being soundproof is not a selling feature per se, but we never realized that a house could be that soundproof. Like you would hear, other than maybe a really bad thunderstorm, you don't hear anything. You don't hear the birds. You don't hear cars going up your driveway. If I'm outside trying to get my wife's attention, I can yell all day long. She won't hear me.
Do you remember, anything specific when you first moved in due to the air quality of the building? We
run it normally so we draw air from outside. It comes through, is pre-warmed, and then it goes into our regular to the household temperature. But remember, my property is very rural. So for us, going from living in the city to living in rural Muskoka, and you've got the smell of a forest coming through the house. So you've got the air is drawn in. So I think it exchanges once every, I think we have it set, it exchanges the air, the full volume of the house. I believe it's once every every 30 minutes or something like that. But it's just weird because you can smell, again, you're in the middle of a forest. You can smell the pine trees. You can smell the earth. You can smell the flowers in the early spring or late fall. And it's a very different experience to living in a house in the city where the air is stale. It doesn't move in the same way.
Well, I often describe the air system as ultimately the lungs of the house, and homes that do not have fresh air systems, there's a high percentage of contaminants on the inside of the building. And listening to you describe your experience with the air system totally proves that is the way it is. And for those of our listeners that aren't aware of the efficiency or the specifics of the air system, we're talking about a machine that is continually working year round, full time in the winter, as long as full time in the summer. But with respect to the efficiency alone, machines that can ultimately extract 75% of the heat energy out of the stale air that's leaving the home and transfer all that energy to the incoming cold air at freezing cold temperatures. So tell me, is there anything that you would have done different though with respect to your home?
Oh, we're really happy with it. We could have, at the time, we kind of cheaped out. We could have put a slightly larger set of windows on the north side of the house, but that was kind of going against the traditional passive house rule. But we have this huge vista because we're about 400 meters from the road, surrounded by a forest and Muskoka rock. In hindsight, I could have done larger windows on the north side of the house as opposed to the traditional sizes. But outside of that, no complaints at all. Like it's unreal.
With your house in particular, do you have many windows on the eastern side or the western side?
We're a giant. We have windows all sides. Privacy wasn't a concern, so we went overboard with the windows. However, in order to compensate for the issues of excessive sunlight, when we had the house designed, my wife compromised with the architect, so we did a 4-foot overhang. So all around our house, the overhang is larger than what would be traditional, and because of that, once the summer solstice hits, the direct sunlight does not come in. So the south side or the west side will be bright, but it's not from direct sunlight because the direct sunlight does not come in the summer. So right now, my house is sunny. Another few weeks, once the sun's a little high, angles higher, the direct sun does not come in. And then the direct sunlight won't be back inside the house on the south side until the fall. So once the fall hits and the sun drops lower, my house is lit up like there's no tomorrow.
If you had to be, you talking to people building homes in the financial world, if someone was talking to you about the different types of homes that they were interested in building, what would be that overarching reason to inspire one of your clients to go the passive route?
There's just no comparison with the efficiency. My next door neighbor, so that's 500 meters over, he built a log house. So it's a really beautiful traditional looking Muskoka log home, but they did not incorporate the ideas of what a passive house is. So it's not airtight. When you go in the wintertime, it's hot or it's cold, but it fluctuates because you've got the wood stove cranked up to try and warm the place up, then it's too hot, then it cools down. If you're sitting beside a window, even though it's a brand new house, it's only a year old, I can feel a breeze at the windows. So you don't have the same type of comfort because it fluctuates. In a passive house, the strangest thing is that my wife was warm the whole winter. Back in Mississauga, she was cold the whole winter. Either she's under a blanket or the furnace is going on and off. So you don't have that same stability. In our house, it's the strangest thing. The entire winter, it's 20. We keep the house around 22 Celsius the whole winter, and it does not fluctuate. It's uncanny.
That's a big issue. We're going to keep our wives warm enough and cool enough.
But honestly, the comfort level is not, you can't compare it. And because the air moves nicely, you don't get things like mildew in the corners or everybody thinks it looks cool because you have the frost on the corners of the windows when it's 30 below outside, but that's really telling you that the windows aren't efficient. No matter how cold it is, the last winter wasn't cold, but the previous winter, a few days where it got down to like the low minus 30s, you don't know until you step outside. Go, oh my God, it's cold. It's weird, but you are you just feel safe and cozy and comfortable and warm. It's Muskoka. We've got 3 feet of snow outside. The winds could be howling, and it looks cool, but it doesn't affect you.
I'll build a passive house. You've convinced me.
It really is great.
If they understood what it was, the more people would be doing it, because it's warm, it's comfortable, it's efficient. I'm still a capitalist. It's efficient.
You hit the main point right there. You know, if more people were aware, right? And we talk about the energy conservation, the savings, protecting your investment, you know, with respect to the cost to operate the home all the time. But, you know, it's a type of house where most people would build passive simply for comfort reasons. And the only reason that no one, like some people aren't building passive is simply for lack of awareness, education and awareness. So you hit the nail on the coffin right there with that statement. And that's what this show is all about, to spread.
That's what we're all about. This is the Passive House Show that you're listening to. We've got an amazing guest, Emerson Blackman, and we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back shortly. Cheers.